gets the worm guard. That's what we always say over here. You know, if you're not early or late, that's our motto. Always on time, guard. We're back in saddle again. A little bit of a break, but we came back with a real
Dr.
zinger for
Stein.
you. Today, we are
Listen to this
going to
interview.
be joined by presidential candidate, Dr. Jill Stein. How you doing, Gavin?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. Really excited for this conversation with Dr. Jill Stein. I was thinking about it the other night, dude. I don't know if anyone in our chat has been watching this long or remembers, but actually the very first interviews we ever did on the Vanguard were with Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker, the Green Party candidates from 2020. That was right when Zach and I were getting our start. It was right at the very end of the Bernie Sanders
try to hold it for a little bit.
movement. He had just basically dropped out. The beginning of COVID, yep. And we were like, well, I guess we need someone to stand up to the establishment. I guess, hope.
That's what we always say over here. You know, if you're not early or late, that's our motto. Always on time, guard. We're back in saddle again. A little bit of a break, but we came back with a real zinger for you. Today, we are going to be joined by presidential candidate, Dr. Jill Stein. How you doing, Gavin?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. Really excited for this conversation with Dr. Jill Stein. I was thinking about it the other night, dude. I don't know if anyone in our chat has been watching this long or remembers, but actually the very first interviews we ever did on the Vanguard were with Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker, the Green Party candidates from 2020. That was right when Zach and I were getting our start. It was right at the very end of the Bernie Sanders movement. He had just basically dropped out. The beginning of COVID, yep. And we were like, well,
I'm gonna put this down. I got to do something.
We need someone to stand up to the establishment. I guess, hopefully it'll be Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker. I voted for that ticket in 2020. And I also voted for Jill Stein back.
Where you want? Remember, like, comment, share, hate, subscribe, follow. Please Google me on Yahoo and Bing. And follow and subscribe to my YouTube channel. This is going up on my YouTube as soon as it's done. Okay? I'm going to put this down. I got some work to do. So I'm going to put this down. Please listen to Dr. Jill Stein, JS24, Jill Stein 2024.com.
That's our motto. Always on
That's who I'm supporting.
We're back in saddle again.
This is the best candidate we've ever had.
We came back with a real zinger for you. Today, we are going to be joined by presidential candidate.
Listen closely. And please comment and share and like. Comment.
Great,
Engagement. Comment, like, share.
Conversation with Dr. Jill Stein. I was thinking about it the other night, dude. I don't know if anyone in our chat has been watching this long or remembers, but actually the very first interviews we ever did on the Vanguard were with Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker, the Green Party candidates from 2020. That was right when Zach and I were getting our start. It was right at the very end of the Bernie Sanders movement. He had just basically dropped out. The beginning of COVID, yep. And we were like, well, I guess we need someone to stand up to the establishment. I guess, hopefully it'll be Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker. I voted for that ticket in 2020. And I also voted for Jill Stein back in 2016, something that obviously I talked a lot about on the show. So, we're big fans of Dr. Stein. Really excited to have a conversation with her on the Vanguard. Got some really good questions for her today. So hopefully it's a good discussion. Hopefully she, enjoys it. And hopefully everyone in chat does as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I first came across Dr. Stein, I was like 18 years old, and I was at Buzz Beach Ball. And it was back when they did it at where the Sporting Kansas City plays.
R.I.P. Buzz Beach Ball.
Yeah, right. That was like our own Midwestern shithole town equivalent of a music festival. Sometimes they brought really cool acts there, definitely in comparison to now. But I was reading a Reddit thread about how it wasn't that cool in comparison to St. Louis. The whole time we were just like, we never got any good shows, so we were stoked whenever anything happened. Like this summer, their local music festival has Beck and the Killers as the headliners with like Killer Mike, and our music festival has that dude Milky Chance and Thundercat. I like Thundercat, but he's not
Milky
exactly
Chance is
the
kind of
same.
good.
They haven't put out much in a while. After like fucking 10 years ago, dude. What are you talking about? Anyway, so in that the one L Kansas City constantly takes is they make you travel for concerts. Like, oh my God, I'm in this big headache because I was trying to go to Boston for the Freddie Gibbs show. But now it's like crazy going to Boston that specific weekend because there's like more college students per capita than any other city in America, and it's graduation weekend. So all the hotels are like $600 a night, and I'm like, fuck. So, damn. Anyway, I'm going to try and see it in New York instead.
Wait, so you said you heard about Jill Stein, though, at Buzz Beach?
God, I got so lost in my own diatribe. I'm sorry, guys. This is the Vanguard that you're tuning into after all. Anyway, long story short, we were at that concert, and yeah, there was a bunch of people that were out trying to get everybody to sign for Jill Stein. I remember I got a button, and I told them that I would not be voting in Kansas or Missouri, because at that time I thought I was going off to Chicago to be a big timer. And yeah, that was the end of that. But anyway, things all come full circle now. She should be joining us shortly.
Yeah, any minute now, guys. So hold on to your butts. It'll be any second. Jill Stein entering the lair of the Vanguard. But yeah, shout out to you, Race Car, for the $10. Hope the interview goes well. Well, thank you so much. We're hoping it goes well too. But yeah, shout out to you, bro, for the first super chat of the live stream.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to you, Ron Well. Wish me luck for Cody's sign belt later tonight. Well, that sounds like a WWE reference. You have a good time tonight, Ron Well. Appreciate the super chat.
Yeah, appreciate it, Ron Well. Thank you so much. And yeah, any minute now, guys, Dr. Jill Stein will be making her debut on the Vanguard with Zach and Gavin.
Yeah, it'll be a good time. Anyway, how's your weekend been, dude? I feel like I haven't chatted with you too much. We do have, if we're going to just plug random things, tonight for YouTube members, you'll be able to watch the full version of the most recent Circle Jerk America podcast on the YouTube channel for the Vanguard, or you can check out the podcast version on Spotify. I would put out another episode today. We were joined by a good friend of the show, good politic guy, Mac. He's a good friend of the program, as I said. Anyway, we're stalling for a little bit because we're waiting on our esteemed guest. But I guess we could also talk a little bit about the news. It's not like there's any shortage of topics to get into while we have the time. If you'd like to, Gavin, what's on the top of your mind? Or do you want me to go ahead and pick something random? Like the Moscow concert hall attack and how crazy that was and how we had it all on our fucking time.
Yeah. Here, just give me 1 sec. I'll be right back.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Gavin's going to be like, you know what, Zach, you just stall by yourself on air right now just to make sure that we're all still good. I don't know. I'm sure that Gavin's making sure that he sent the right link to our guest and all that jazz. But let's go ahead and talk about this. You know, a little smoke on the water action. No, that's insensitive. I'm kidding. The Kremlin has declined to comment on growing evidence that Afghan branch of Islamic State, known as the Islamic Khorasan Province, ISKP, masterminded the terrorist attack on Crocus City Concert Hall in Moscow that left 137 people dead. Yeah, it was really fucked up, really brutal. Obviously, there's... oh, hey, what's up, Gavin? You're back already. Perfect. Anyway, it was obviously just a nasty terrorism attack. But what's interesting is it's like, why would ISIS do this, right? Like, what geopolitical edge, like, other than to just, like, you know, cause terror? Definitely interesting. A lot of people are, you know, wondering, you know, why this happened. And then, of course, the Kremlin believes that it was, you know, Ukraine that was using them as a proxy to attack the nation. What are your thoughts on this, Gavin? Do you think there's any merit to those kind of, you know, I don't know, do you think that should be investigated?
I mean, I suppose, obviously, all of the different theories should be investigated. But yeah, I've seen all sorts of insane conspiracies. Basically, everything from Ukraine did it to Israel did it to Russia themselves did it as like a false flag. So, yeah, I mean, there's just so much speculation out right now. And it doesn't seem like there's really any clear answer other than, you know, people who claim to know all of the answers. And, you know, it's just a weird situation. Obviously, very tragic. I don't know if you saw those images and videos of those gunmen just like open firing on people at the concert hall. Very horrific footage.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of one of the terror attacks that happened at that, what was it, the Eagles of Death Metal concert in Paris.
In Paris.
Yeah, which was fucking gnarly. Yeah, and obviously it's horrible. You know, reporters also asked why Vladimir Putin and Russian authorities did not mention IS as a possible organizer of the attack. The investigation continues. No solid theory has been announced just yet. This is only a matter of preliminary information, Peskov says. let's see. Putin claimed without evidence that Ukraine had aided attackers and had planned to open a window for the gunmen to escape. Like, it's definitely not beyond the realm of possibility that, you know, oh yeah, hey, you're going to do this fucking horrible terrorism attack on this country we're at war with. Like, I don't know. We don't have the evidence to say that one way or another, but it's also like, I'm not in the business of taking an international terror organization at their face value. Of course, their whole idea, how they stay relevant, how they stay, you know, in discussion, how they instill fear in people is by infamy, right? It's by claiming, you know, that they were responsible for these horrendous attacks because it adds to their quote unquote, you know, they're kind of like international clout, right? In the, you know, murder for hire business. Ryan Grimm, we were talking about this on Circle Jerks yesterday. Ryan Grimm was talking about how ISIS also claimed responsibility for an attack in Pakistan recently, and so it seems like they've either as an organization, you know, or to the extent that there is a real organization, that it's not just like a fray, kind of like, you know, what's the group of amorphous people in on the alt-right that's always around, you know, the Proud Boys and all that shit. Like a lot of people claim to be Proud Boys, but I don't think there's like an actual organization that's facilitating it. Anyway, we can go ahead and pause that story for later. Just, you know, a little bit of us reading the news for you guys. I'm sure you loved that. But anyway, today we're going to get into some real discourse. And Gavin, you want to intro our guest?
Yeah, it does look like our special guest for this afternoon has arrived. So everyone, please welcome Dr. Jill Stein. She's an American physician activist and, of course, Green Party political candidate for president. She's running right now for the third time as the Green Party candidate. So we're really excited to get into that. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you so much. Really great to be here. Sorry for the delay.
Oh, no, you're totally fine. I saw that there was a cat that leaped off your lap as well, so love to see that as well.
I'm sure he will be joining the broadcast shortly.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm sure you're so busy with all of the campaigning, running around the country, trying to get ballot access and all that good stuff. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning and take some of our questions. We have some good ones for you. So hopefully this is a great conversation. I was telling Zach a little bit about how our first interviews ever on this podcast were actually with Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker, the 2020 Green Party candidates. So we've been kind of interviewing, promoting third-party options for the entire history of our show. And I actually voted for you in 2016. That was the first presidential candidate I ever voted for. So super excited to have this discussion. And I figure a good place to start would actually be by talking a little bit about the Green Party nominating process. Despite the fact that you're the most high-profile candidate running in the Green Party primary, can you tell us a little bit about what it's like running in the Green Party primary? And are there still any other candidates that are also vying for the nomination? Also, do you know when the Green Party convention might be held?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So starting with the last one first, the convention is still to be determined, and it may be July or it may be August. So it's a ways. But the you know, the votes for the delegates are taking place right now. There are two other candidates that have been recognized by the national party, but the state parties have their own process. So some of them will just adopt the candidates of the national party, and some of them have different set of standards, and they look carefully at the platform and so on. So California only put our campaign on the ballot, and had we not run, there would not have been any candidates in the California primary. So that's just an example of how different states all have their own process. Some have an election, as in California, which was on the ballot. They had, you know, a typical primary. Many of the other states hold conventions and, you know, decide and cast their votes and basically apportion their delegates. So we have won every state process so far, and currently we have about 90% of the delegates. Within the next 2 weeks or so, we'll probably have enough delegates that we will have the majority and basically have the nomination. You know, at that point, I think we can say we're definitely the presumptive candidate when we have the delegates, even though the actual nomination itself won't take place still until this summer.
Interesting. And I mean, how do you feel about that? This has been your third time making a run for the presidency as a Green Party candidate. Do you feel like you've, learned a lot from your experiences the last two times? And are you excited to go at this once again with a new strategy, perhaps?
Yeah, totally. I feel like we have been kind of ahead of the curve on the issues, and the policies that we've put out, starting in the year 2000, really, with Ralph Nader, who launched many of our basic policies, including single payer. He first introduced that into the national discourse. He was the first candidate to really advocate for it. And in 2012, our campaign introduced abolishing student debt, public higher education as a human right for free, reparations, ranked choice voting, the Green New Deal, climate as a crisis. Really on every one of those issues, we sort of pushed the envelope. You may remember I was ridiculed in 2012 by John Oliver for the preposterous idea that we could abolish student debt. I understand he's
That's such a hilarious example of something that's aged like milk, by the way. That's a tremendous call out, by the way, because especially a guy like Oliver is he kind of touts his progressive bona fides. But even that was like beyond his thinking, and now it's like, mainstream. That was a promise that Joe Biden made, an empty promise, certainly, but at least it came out of one of the most normie liberals of all time. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. And I heard, I haven't seen it yet, but I heard that John Oliver just did a big, program, a show all about, how student debt should be abolished. Now, I would ask, does he have the, how's he going to do it? What's his economic program to make this happen? Which I think is just BS, because do we ever ask where $1 trillion will come from to pay our Pentagon budget, to pay the military budget? Where's this $17 billion going to come from to enable Israel's genocide? There's going to be another $17 billion. Are we looking at that? We should really have a war tax, by the way, so that we know what we are paying, for these wars. According to Jeffrey Sachs, from the Columbia University Department of Sustainable Development, pretty good guy at crunching numbers, an economist. It's cost us $12,000 this year alone to pay for that military budget. And since the incredibly successful post 9/11 wars, where we've been catastrophically losing every one, we are paying per household about $50,000 each. So just in terms of like where the money's going to come from, it's just so funny that people like John Oliver were really putting their foot down about student debt a couple of years ago. He's changed his tune.
It's so funny how people, are so, married to this idea that, kitchen table issues, like you have to, you take out a loan, you have to pay it back, right? Meanwhile, there's no public discourse at all about the PPP loans that were given to, as massive handouts to inflate the net worth of a bunch of corporations who are worried about not being able to meet their profit growth, goals, and, basically like a total windfall for them while the rest of the working class was suffering. You brought up the military-industrial complex, how it's never asked to account for the expense when it comes to the taxpayer, or the expense when it comes to things that we could be doing, to benefit the world instead of destroy it. And I also wanted to ask you about how that plays into climate change, right? We know that one of the largest polluters is the United States military. I mean, war is pollution of all kinds, but specifically carbon pollution, and it's devastating to the ecosystems, which should seem obvious, but it's left out of the conversation a lot of times when people talk about carbon rollbacks. They have absolutely no mention of the military-industrial complex. And you look at candidates who claim to care about climate change. I'm mostly mentioning Joe Biden and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who claim to have this, green message, to whatever extent you believe that. However, they will both cheerlead a massacre and huge expenditures of the military budget. I'm just wondering if you could talk about your position on that, and how you would reel that in and kind of engage climate activists both by, things like going green, but also by scaling back the military.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so it's like the military is in the business of destroying the environment, as well as, as well as climate pollution, and they're up there. I forget the number exactly, but they emit more CO2 than most nations of the world. It may be up in the, like in the 40s rank, somewhere around there, if I recall correctly. They're huge emitters, but they're actually in the business of destroying the environment anyhow. If you look at what's going on in Gaza, for example, a case in point of an all-out crisis, a genocide, a flagrant, blatant, outrageous, horrific genocide that's just dripping blood across our computer screens and our iPhones by the day. But there's all sorts of environmental and climate ties there as well. Like that are some huge reserves both under Gaza and offshore. And, it's speculated that this pier that Joe Biden wants to build may have more to do with accessing and exporting those fossil fuels than actually the food crisis, because it's kind of late. You can't wait 2 months if you're starving when you could just open up the roads. If Joe Biden wanted to solve the starvation problem, he could do it with a phone call. Congress could do it. Congress certainly can't do it when
it's crazy that the Emiratis are being one of the leading nations to call for an end to the starvation of the civilians of Gaza. It's not exactly a bastion of human rights over there in the United Arab Emirates. Yeah. I mean, it's just, all the ironies are just incredible. And meanwhile, Israel and the U.S. are making themselves a absolute pariah among nations, but especially among Israel's neighbors there. But you have like these fossil fuels that the U.S. is arguably going for here, and perhaps Israel is too, I don't know, but there is a fossil fuel link here. And then you have the fact that the flooding of the tunnels, I don't know if they've done that yet, but this was talked about, flooding the tunnels with salt water, which would like permanently destroy the aquifers that supply Gaza and arguably parts of Israel too, I don't know. But it's just nuts in this day and age when we have such a all-out crisis of water to think that any aquifer is being permanently damaged. And then you have the Israelis, who were destroying the water supply as part of their, assault on Palestinians and part of their war crimes. They were actually, Rachel Corrie herself was murdered, was basically mowed down by a bulldozer when she tried to protect a home from a home demolition, which is also a war crime and a crime against humanity. But she was, part of the reason that was motivating her was that the Israelis had just basically bulldozed a major water supply. One of the few sources of water for Gaza had just been like cemented over, I think. I mean, it's just unbelievable the kinds of crimes against humanity that are being carried out now in our name and with our tax dollars. Talk about our tax dollars and how they're being absolutely squandered here. To my mind, like, it's very easy to dive into the abyss of fury, and just being so angry at the human rights abuses that are going on. And I have to remind myself, the point here is not to get angry, the point is to get even, and to basically direct that energy into mobilizing and strategizing and getting the word out, to help us fight back and remove from office our criminal misleaders. Everyone who voted for that bill, it's just like shocking. There was unanimity, I think, among the Democrats for this child starvation bill that passed 2 days ago. The list of votes is like a confessional for war criminals, and I think they all need to be considered war criminals here. It's not just the White House, it's also Congress who are being criminal, genociders right now. This is absolutely inexcusable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of organizing and mobilizing, I want to talk a little bit about strategy. Every election cycle that goes by, it seems like a lot of people ask what the goal or purpose of voting third party is. I personally always encourage people, specifically those who live in deep red or deep blue states, to vote green just as a protest against the duopoly and in hopes of helping the Greens reach that critical 5% threshold, which would guarantee you guys federal matching funds for the next election and help to grow the movement. Since I've been voting Green since 2016 and the party does have yet to reach that 5% number, I wanted to ask you what the strategy is this time around, if you're planning on doing anything differently than in 2012 or 2016 to achieve at least that 5% number, just so people really feel like they have a serious reason to come out and cast their vote for Dr. Jill Stein.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we are in this kind of unique historic moment right now. You know, we're really at the breaking point on housing, on, keeping a roof over your head. 50% of renters, are severely economically stressed, paying over 30% of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. And in many cities like New York, it's more like 50 and 60% of your income. Homelessness and evictions are skyrocketing. There are some 70,000 roughly deaths every year from inadequate coverage on health insurance. The climate crisis is exploding. War after war is draining our resources and endangering us all with potential nuclear conflicts. Any of these, points of conflict could go nuclear. There are just so many reasons now. And then you've got this genocide, which is being, led really by Joe Biden and the Democrats. And also, censorship, which is arguably, and the clamp down on our civil liberties. And you've got cop cities and the war on protesters, criminalizing protest. And so the bottom line to me is that we have absolutely nothing to lose here. And there's no longer a lesser evil. We've got two greater evils. What greater trademark of fascism exists, beyond genocide? And we have Joe Biden leading the charge on that genocide. So the argument that we have to vote for the lesser evil here, it's just not possible to say who is the lesser evil. Trump was the one recent modern president, the only one who hasn't committed us to a new major war. So, the arguments that Trump is inherently more fascistic or more dangerous than the Democrats, I just reject at its surface. So the bottom line is nobody owns your vote. Politicians have to earn your vote, especially now when half of Democratic voters in Michigan did not come out to vote for their primary. That's in addition to the 14% uncommitted, which was an anti-Biden vote. But even beyond that, you had half of voters just didn't come out at all. So those votes are not owned by the Democratic Party. They are owned by voters. And, voters are clamoring like never before for other options. One reality I just want to put out there is that there are going to be 4 candidates, count them, 4 corporate pro-war, pro-genocide candidates: Biden, Trump, no labels, and RFK. Mm-hmm. They could be dividing the genocide vote. And there will be one campaign that will be on the ballot across the country. We are on track to do that. We have 75% of the work actually behind us right now. We are on in 21 states, and there are several that will be turning in within the next couple of weeks. It'll move from 21 probably to about 25 very soon, and then there are more forthcoming after that. But we have the majority, like 3/4 of the signatures done. So we are on track. Even RFK is only on in 4 ballots, right? In 4 states right now. Governor Cornel West, I think for Claudia De La Cruz, maybe on in 5 or so. But, none of these are going to be on in the difficult states. With the exception of Claudia, she'll be on in California through Peace and Freedom. She will be their candidate. But aside from that, it's going to be very hard for them to get on in any other, big major state. We're all on in Texas, California, Florida, Illinois, I believe. We have most, in Arizona. Arizona is another very difficult one. We have most of the difficult battles behind us. There are a couple remaining, like notably New York State, where the rules have been changed in order to try to keep us off the ballot. But we are fighting. We expect to be going full bore across the country. In 2016, we were on for 97% of voters in 47 states, and we expect to do better than that. We are aiming for all this time around. So the bottom line is we are going to be the one contender that can truly challenge empire, we will be the one contender that represents the one campaign that's actually fighting across the country on climate, a pro-worker agenda, the anti-war, and the anti-genocide agenda. We're going to be it. So you could see a convergent vote around our campaign.
So
when you have a five-way split, you know, it only takes 21% to win the day. Now, that's not necessarily how it's going to divide up, but that is to make the point that this really is a perfect storm for change. And I think, like, where do we set our sights? We set our sights on turning the White House into a greenhouse, and we'll all be the better for it. You know, whatever it is, we need it as a springboard to the next step. And I think so many people are now convinced that this is impossible. You cannot have a revolution and a counter-revolutionary party, and we cannot solve the crises that we face now around the margins. This is not about window dressing. It's not about one policy. We really need a reboot that is of, by, and for the people.
Right.
And so many people now are ready to stand up and fight, and they don't buy the spoiler arguments anymore.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned just how many candidates are going to be running in this race, and not just corporate candidates, but there's also a few lefty candidates with fairly similar perspectives and platforms as the Green Party platform. So I wanted to just briefly get this out of the way. A lot of people in our audience were pretty excited when Dr. West briefly joined the Green Party, and many were quite disheartened when he left to run as an independent. Since leaving the Green Party, Dr. West has made several vague comments about his experience, saying that he experienced disrespect and even betrayal at the hands of yourself and the Green Party, which has left many third-party voters, frankly, just confused as to which ticket actually deserves their support come November. I was wondering if, just for the sake of clearing up some of that confusion, is there any chance you could shed some light on these accusations of betrayal?
Yeah, I mean, I think what betrayal was about was the fact that I didn't follow him outside the Green Party. You know, and I had made perfectly clear that we had worked for years to build our capacity to fight and to get on the ballot and, you know, to be a force to challenge empire. And when he walked, and I wasn't consulted at all before his decision. I understood he was concerned about many debates and about being required to defend his positions and explain them. That's what I understood was the problem. It's hard working with a party. It's much easier to run alone. But if you run alone, you don't have support. You know, I mean, that's what being in an organization is all about. Dr. West has a very powerful, inspired, compelling voice, and he's always operated solo. He's never had to work within an organization, and especially not within any political party. And when he entered the People's Party, he had no idea what he was getting into, apparently, and that didn't go so well. Several of us who were close collaborators of his tried to help rescue him, and we spent months, 24/7, giving up family vacations, unpaid, to put his campaign on track and to get him up and running and to fundraise for him. We worked ourselves to the bone. I was initially campaign manager, which is not my favorite position, but I did that because he needed one at the time. But then we were making different kinds of decisions. I'm used to making decisions based on experience in many presidential campaigns, like about how you hire and what are your criteria for hiring. And he didn't want to do that. You know, he's a much more kind of family-centered campaign and person. And to me, that wasn't acceptable. And so I stepped back from being campaign manager. I don't think he considered that betrayal. I think what he considered betrayal was that when he decided to leave, without consulting any of us, that we didn't follow him. Well, for me, it was never about a person. It was always about a movement. And if you have ballot lines, you've got to use them. And I tried to explain to him that he would be screwed. There's no way that he could raise the big money to get on the ballot, you know, to be a contender. And he still doesn't have a solution for how he's going to get on the ballot. He walked away from what was at the time like $4 or $5 million worth of ballot lines. Now, because of price inflation around signature collection, it's more like $6 or $7 million that he walked away from in existing ballot lines. So I don't think he's ever going to make up that gap. So, you know, I did not want to walk away from decades worth of work to have created an infrastructure for truly contesting for power. it's very hard when you're running for office for the first time. That's enough to deal with, let alone learning how to work with a party. I myself got tricked into running for office for the first time in 2002, and that was to run for governor. And I was approached by members of the Green Party in my home state who said, why don't you just do what you're doing, keep fighting these battles for single payer, it was called at the time, Medicare for all, for, for green energy, for green jobs, for free public higher education. Said, why don't you just do that, but call it a political campaign and have a broader audience to speak with? And I said, sure, nothing else is working, might as well try politics. But it took me then several races to figure out how to work with the Green Party. It's not obvious how you work with a party in something like the Greens, where they don't have a machine. If you're a Democrat, the machine comes to you, it gives you your agenda, it gives you your materials, it gives you your database, it gives you your staff, it gives you everything. In a small grassroots party doesn't do that, and it takes some learning to figure out, who are the players that you want to be working with, who's really going to go to bat for you,
Right.
and et cetera. It's not easy to do. So to his credit, he had a very steep hill to climb, and it's not surprising to me that it didn't work out, on the first run. But we weren't going to throw away our ballot lines, or I wasn't going to throw away.
Of course not. Yeah.
So, I think he's a newbie here politically. We pitched, even after he left, we pitched that maybe we could collaborate and do a split ticket, and he wasn't interested. I think he considers it betrayal that I then jumped in to run for office. I think he felt like that was betrayal, but what was I going to do? We had such little time because California's process was coming up, and we had to do all sorts of paperwork to contest, which we had already done for Cornell. Now we had to do it all over again to get us in the contention for the California ballot, which is huge. I mean, this is like a $4 million proposition. And I tried to get a Jamu Baraka to run just because, it just felt like that would be great. And I did not have on my radar running for president this time around. But, Ajamu refused. We had a fight for about 2 weeks and he won. So he won. I had to run. Just because you can't mobilize a campaign quickly, to be able to do stuff. And we had done this twice before, so it wasn't so hard to mobilize our team and jump in. So I think that to him was this shocker that we were going to fill these ballot lines. And I think he still doesn't quite understand the nature of ballot access. So he feels like that was a personal, insult to him. It really wasn't, it was never about him. It was really about fighting empire.
Well, that seems to I nothing but respect for Dr. Cornel West and all that he's, contributed to the, in all the work that he's done. But that does seem to be a kind of a through line throughout all of the discourse around his most recent political run, being that, it's a little bit more about Dr. West than it is about anything else, which we could maybe say for another day. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, it seems like a lot of progressives, and Gavin and I fall into this trap too, because for us, our political awakening, it came at such a time. I think the only comparison would be like coming into it in like the Vietnam War, anti-war movement, right? Where it's like you are 18 years old, 17 years old if you're me and Gavin, that Bernie Sanders says, hey man, actually, you don't have to worry about ruining your life by going to college if we do things this way. Like you're like, you can do a job you want. You could major in philosophy. Things would, be okay. Pursue your passions. Everybody's entitled to healthcare. Like, move forward. And so we are like fucking fanatics for the next, and you have like always something that you could do, always something you could talk about. There's always the next thing to chase. It's structured, right? And everybody just thought that's how it's always going to be, right? You say, yep, I support good things, and then the people just come to you, right? But it was almost like lightning in a bottle, and I don't think people realize how special, particularly that 2016 to 2020 era was. And now there's like this expectation that, all I have to do is get up on Twitter with a big microphone and say, I support good things and I oppose bad things and I have lefty bona fides. And then the people will just oceanfront wait for you, and you'll be the new Bernie Sanders, and you'll be going to ice cream socials in Iowa. It seems like obviously we know to some capacity that there's a lot more, behind the scenes baseball happening, a lot more negotiation, a lot more organizing. But yeah, it's just so baffling to think that, he would, that somebody would walk away from the infrastructure, because I think that's what Gavin and I, admire most about your guys' work, is how much of the groundwork that you guys have laid, how much of the hard, thankless work that goes into ballot access, that goes into laying the infrastructure for this. And so, yeah, I could understand, where you're coming from, where you didn't even intend to, go full bore with all this, but what are we going to do, right? So I guess my last question for you would be, what's the message to the young people, right? People like us who are like, fuck, man, we have a lot of shit that needs to change, like, immediately. How do you mobilize? What's your message for people under 30?
Yeah, and I love your question and how you put it, and I so relate to your wild enthusiasm for what looked like a solution. And I grew up in the Vietnam War, and I relate to the passion of your resistance. And for us, people were getting dragged over to the war and shot up and killed, as well as it being a horrific and unjust war. We also had the draft to mobilize people at the time. And then we had kind of the environmental awakening and the civil rights awakening. And it's like my, formative years were, oh my God, we have so much potential power here. And we had, huge mobilizations between civil rights and somewhat in labor, but it was mostly civil rights and environment and anti-war. It was just so exciting. And it felt like, wow, we were shutting down our universities, in protest to the war. We were setting up, alternative universities. I was at Harvard at the time, and we shut Harvard down, and we had a alternative community university. And it was sort of like Occupy before Occupy. And, it felt like this is so right and so just and so needed. How can it be stopped? And then we just saw it get stopped. We closed that war and had a little bit of an interlude, but I think after that, the kind of wars went more underground. It was more like CIA overthrows for quite a while. And
basically until now, right? Dirty war tactics, you pioneered by, the George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan, basically, and then implemented with the Bushes and the Obamas. I've been reading a lot about that recently, so it's fresh on my mind.
It's pretty incredible, and just the like in Haiti, Haiti, the chaos in Haiti is a direct
Devastating
consequence of this. We overthrew Aristide twice in the last couple of decades, and
we supported the guy that is now in like Puerto Rico, and he can't go back to Haiti because he got power after Moise was assassinated, and we were like, hey, here, have this guy. And every single time the United States is like, here, have this guy, and the people are like, no, but we don't ever think to you give them some money and some treasury bonds and say, hey, why don't we rebuild the infrastructure of Haiti because it's fucking dilapidated and destroyed.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have Hillary Clinton going in under Barack Obama. After they had overthrown Aristide. I mean, to my mind, this is just like such a like a microcosm of why the system is so evil. You had Hillary Clinton going in to overturn a referendum that had raised the minimum wage from 31 cents an hour to 61 cents an hour. Hillary Clinton pushed that back to 31 cents an hour in order to maintain, the low prices that Levi's, wanted to sell at. This is all in service of corporations. Same thing in Honduras, where Juan Orlando Hernandez was just convicted of cocaine trafficking. He was the president who was celebrated and protected under Obama. Hillary Clinton, advocated for him. Where are the migrants coming from? They are fleeing the violence that comes in the wake of the drug cartels and the drug cartels that are then, installed in the presidency. It's like, this is just the personification of corruption and evil. This is why
Mexico didn't even want to ban drugs. They were like, that's going to create a nightmare in our society. And we were like, well, if you want to buy insulin, you better fucking do what we say. And that's exactly what created the cartel problem. And the cartel problem spread all throughout Central and South America, Northern South America, right? And that's in between us overthrowing every fucking leader, arming the torturers, like, you know, everything that happened in El Salvador. I mean, the list is endless. Like, you start looking at Panama, you know, it's insane. And then people have the gall to be like, we need to build a wall. All these fucking people are coming into our country. And it's like, no shit, asshole. You destroyed their country and you overthrew their leadership every fucking time they got shit straight. They elect Allende. Guess what happens to him, right? Like, this is it's crazy. They get Pinochet, you know what I mean? We crack down Carter, break some skulls, make sure they don't relent again. That's what America does. It's a dominant mafioso type of a deal. And I'm glad that you're kind of, you know, here to raise awareness for that.
Well, exactly. Awareness, and also to connect the dots, because this comes home. You know, this comes back to bite us. For one thing, that the military budget, you know, in order for us to conduct these endless wars and overthrows, it requires a lot of our resources, you know, so that we don't have housing and healthcare and decent schools and, you know, and clean water and all that. So this all ties directly to the quality of our lives, not to mention the wars that are capable of going nuclear. Russia happens to have an alliance now, a military alliance with Iran, and we are bombing Iranian targets around Iran, as well as 4 other countries in the Middle East. This is like pre-World War I, but with nuclear weapons thrown into the mix. So this comes back to bite us. If there is a nuclear confrontation, just one nuclear submarine, a nuclear submarine that's armed with nuclear weapons, one of those contains 4,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs, which are capable of putting us, knocking us, you know, mostly into nuclear winter, so that at least half the population would die. Because when you have these big nuclear explosions, you know, the mushroom clouds, that's the debris getting carried into the upper atmosphere where it doesn't settle out. It can't weather out. So it's up there for decades, and you lose your food supply. You know, that's just one of the many ways that the criminal mismanagement of our resources, you know, comes back to bite us. And that, to me, is like the hope of the moment, is that people are pissed off. People are tired of being thrown under the bus. Working people know that this is all about protecting the economic elites that then become the political elites. So we are in this perfect storm for rebellion right now. And to me, this is the excitement of this election, because you are going to have these 4, you know, pro-genocide powers that can be splitting the vote. And then you will have a one unifying campaign. Because at the end of the day, you know, God love Cornel West, but he's not going to be on very many ballots. And he may at some point see the light there, that he's not on, he's basically a voice in the wilderness. So his voice is great, but he's not a realistic contender. He's not actually going to be able to fight empire. You know, I think the same is true across the board. The other campaigns do not have a track record for getting on the ballot. Even RFK, rolling in dough, you know, he's hardly on any ballots at all.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not so simple. At the end of the day, it's going to be one very unifying progressive campaign and 4 that are not. And I think it's so important for us to just reject all of the presumptions that have been drilled into our brains that this is unwinnable or that we are small players. In an election that could be won with 21%, and that's 21% of the popular vote, but in each state, you can win, you know, you can win all of the electoral votes with pluralities. You don't have to have a majority to win your electoral vote. So it is actually possible to threaten empire and to contest for power with 21 or 25% or who knows what. The main point is reject the propaganda of powerlessness that's been drummed into us. As Alice Walker says, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We have the power here, and with Frederick Douglass's advice, you know, power concedes nothing without a demand. We have that power. The name of the game right now is not persuading people. It's like getting the word out to let people know there is a way to end your debt, your student debt or your medical debt. You can cast a vote to acquire health care as a human right, to have access to affordable housing, to put these endless wars to bed and move this $1.5 trillion every year back into our actual economy, to deal with the immigrant crisis in a responsible and equitable way that ensures that people who are seeking asylum get asylum, but that we stop forcing people to abandon their homes and their livelihoods and subjecting them to mudslides and floods and drought and forcing their migration. We actually have a system of solutions and programs that are affordable at the end of the day, way more affordable, and they create a world that we not only survive in, but that we can thrive in. And it's a world that works for all of us. We have to stand up and demand that, like our lives depend on it.
Still here.
Because they do, and because this actually is within our reach. But we have to throw off this...
Subscribe to my channel.
This veil of propaganda that we're told to think small. I think
share.
We have to think as big
Smash
as we
the like
possibly
button.
can. And then whatever we get is a win. If it's 5%, that's a huge win. If it's 15%, that's bigger. If we get 25% and we win, that's really great. But however far we get, simply by fighting the system and, living to fight another day and to fight stronger and better and smarter and with more credibility, because our star is rising, theirs is setting, this is a win. And to me, that's our objectives in this race. And the fact that we are getting traction early on, like especially in the Muslim community now, in the Arab American community, which is on fire and which has the courage of their convictions because they have seen up close and personal that there is no lesser evil. We have two, disastrous greater evils right now that are ramming themselves down our throats. They have the courage of their convictions to actually stand up. And it's like the emperor's new clothes thing. Once somebody says it and does it, it becomes possible to galvanize a whole lot of desperate people. Polls show that young people now, this was a Harvard study about a year ago, showed that half of all people under, I think it's like 30, it might be 35, it's probably 30, are hopeless. They describe themselves as hopeless about the future. 1/4 of young people have said that within the last 2 weeks they have considered doing harm to themselves. Now, what an alarming and disastrous statistic that is, that our world has become that unsurvivable, that our younger generation is, contemplating, ending it all right here and now. To me, that just underscores that we have everything to gain and nothing to lose by a true, all-out uprising here, and we need to get the word out. If you've ever dealt with someone who's terminally sick or has a serious cancer or they're drowning, suddenly they want to live, no matter what they were thinking beforehand. When you're really confronted with your mortality, you'd rather keep going. And, to my mind, that's where people are at. And it's a lifeline that we need to throw them. It's hard to do when the vehicles for communication have all been hijacked. When the predators own the mechanisms of communication, it's very hard to get the word out. But independent media, like this broadcast, are the proof that you cannot shut down our communications. And this is a thriving, alternative media that has risen up right now. And we need to seize the moment here, and we can seize the moment. So it's extremely exciting. I'd say hold on to your hat and make as much trouble as we possibly can, and let's see how far we can get.
Absolutely. I just have one more question for you, Dr. Stein, and that has a little bit to do with RFK Jr., who you mentioned a second ago. He actually announces his VP pick tomorrow. I think specifically, I believe he's doing that because in order to get ballot access as an independent, he has to name a running mate in some states. And I was just wondering what you make of his candidacy. I think part of the reason that he's been so successful at gaining attention is obviously not only that he's a Kennedy, he has the name recognition, but also he's done what so many faux populists do, where he appropriates a lot of left-wing talking points and left-wing logic. Like, you might remember he pretended to be an anti-interventionist when it came to Ukraine, but now all of a sudden you can't find a bigger cheerleader for the genocide that Israel is doing in Palestine. Some people would even say he's a little bit further than even Joe Biden goes on that issue with his just insanely pro-Israel stance. So I'm wondering what you make of that. If you're worried that he might trick some voters into thinking that he's the real anti-war or left-wing anti-establishment option. And then also, Are you also, planning a running mate announcement in the near future? Can we, do we have any speculation that we could maybe get about that?
Okay, so first on RFK, I really share your analysis, and I feel like he's a very deceptive candidate. And while he pretends to be honest, he's still claiming to be an anti-war candidate, and then he just talks about Ukraine. As if the Middle East war is negligible or a small thing. I mean, it's not only the genocide, it's also, this $17 billion, which has not yet been appropriated, but probably will be soon. It was not a part of his budget bill. But that $17 billion is not only to double down on genocide, it's also to expand the Middle East war. We are in another full-blown Middle East war. We are bombing 4 countries, and we're bombing Iranian targets. So, consider it 5. Where Russia is basically tied in here in an alliance with Iran. So this is as dangerous as any ongoing war. I mean, I think it's more dangerous, actually, than any at the moment. And it shows absolutely no sign of retreating. And you have RFK appearing with some of the most, reactionary fascistic Zionists out there. And the policies that he espouses himself are extremely fascistic. So I find him disingenuous isn't the word. I'd say extremely hypocritical in the extreme and deceptive and manipulative. The way that he uses the Kennedy name, like for that big football ad that his potential VP running mate paid for, he's just cashing in on his name, on kind of the Kennedy aristocracy. And he pretends to be a fan of getting money out of politics, but his super PAC, you wouldn't be working with a super PAC at all. I mean, it's illegal to work with a super PAC, but you wouldn't be giving a thumbs up to a super PAC or looking to a super PAC to get you on the ballot, which is very
Kennedy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's hard to say it more clearly than that. So, he has a right to run. He brings a lot of debate to the table. That's good, but he should be honest about who and what he is. He is not about getting money out of politics. He's all over money in politics, and one can't help but suspect that he's in the pocket of the Zionists in order to get their money. And
of course.
See him doing his fundraisers with them. That's what this is about. It's just
he got accused of anti-Semitism and ran right to Rabbi Shmuley, and he was like, no, because he had those comments connecting like the COVID vaccine to Orthodox Judaism and the Chinese. It's like, figure that's some real sharp analysis, Bobby, but
Yeah,
absolutely. And then, Dr. Stein, did you want to say anything about a potential running mate? Are you planning on making that announcement in the near future?
We have begun some serious discussions, I would say, that much. And, we're interested in a unifying ticket, a ticket that will, kind of unify us across the left. And so we're definitely exploring what kinds of collaborations could come out of this. And there are several contenders, from what should we say, not the mainstream white community. And so I'm very excited to see how this goes. And
cool.
I won't say anything yet because I don't want to curse it before it's born. But I think what we hear a lot out on the campaign trails, that people are really hungry for a united front and really feel like we have enormous power here. And we need to be in the business of building that. I have been among the Greens who've always been working to build coalitions. We had a structure around, I think it was 2012, 2014. It lasted right up until Bernie launched his campaign, which kind of broke it all up. But it was a unifying build among lefty parties. It was called Left Elect, and it sought to build solidarity and collaboration, both for electoral reforms to open up our voting system, like with ranked choice voting or ranked choice proportional representation, et cetera, opening up ballot access, getting money out of politics. There are a lot of things we could do to democratize our election system. And the hope was that we can do this with other small parties. And by small parties, I mean not just new parties. Some people say, it's all about the new parties. Well, actually, no labels may be a new party, but it's the same old, billionaire-controlled.
It's also a fake party. Like, we could be real like that. I'll pass on the diplomacy. It's there to hawk people's books every 4 years if it lasts at all.
Yeah, totally. And
Yeah.
we'll see what it does. But it's got a lot of money, so it's getting on the ballot, and it will probably be there. And they'll probably find someone. It might be, various unsavory characters who, sort of dropped out of the Republican Party, or they can't find their.
Yeah, a Joe Manchin or something like that.
Yeah, although apparently he's declining now, so
Okay.
who will it be? Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, so people are really hungry for collaboration, not just among new parties, but among grassroots, non-corporate parties. That is the name of the game. That's where our power is. That's what people are really. There's an uprising in full swing about this. It's been building for a long time, and we're all at the edge right now. Whether the Colorado River is about to shut down, and there goes the California agriculture system. The Colorado River almost doesn't make it over the dam to irrigate, everything in the terrain of the Colorado River. And when the California agriculture system goes down, the Washington Post ran an article about this about a year ago that called it the doomsday scenario. Now, they're not given to exaggeration and hyperbole. This really is a doomsday scenario. And we don't have a plan. We don't have a way to keep the California agriculture system going the way it is. That's half the fruits and vegetables for the nation, and then you have the accelerated melt of major ice sheets right now in the Antarctic and Greenland, and we could see a big breakup of what's called the Thwaites Glacier, which holds 2 feet of sea level. It's about to lose its shelf. When it loses its shelf, it will have an accelerated slide into the ocean, potentially raising sea level way more faster than our worst expectations. There's all kinds of stuff. There's this, what's called the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. It's a very big name, but what it means is that there's a big loop of warm water that gets distributed partly on the Gulf Stream and then beyond. And it's this loop that stirs up the oceans. And it not only keeps Western Europe warm, but it also keeps the oceans alive because it mixes up nutrients and it brings oxygen to lower levels of the ocean. And it has historically ground to a halt under certain geologic conditions. And we are approaching those right now. It is slowing down. This is very well documented, and it is expected to stop anywhere from 2025 to 50 years after that. It's going to stop. At the rate we're going unless we take dramatic steps, which is why we're advocating for an emergency Green New Deal to really, what you hear Biden talk about is making renewable energy. But nature doesn't care about that. Climate doesn't care about that. It cares about fossil fuels. You have to shut down the fossil fuels on an emergency basis as quickly as possible, but you can't leave people in the lurch. So we have to, create the green jobs and ensure that we have a just emergency transition. We would begin that on day one by declaring the climate emergency, even before we've convinced a strong grassroots movement to lean on its congressional representatives in order to pass this stuff, which is how we are going to work, by having a president who will be the organizer in chief, and that we will mobilize grassroots support, which we're going to need if we're going to get elected, but then we have to use that support in order to pass essential critical bills like Medicare for all, etc. But we have the capacity through the powers of the presidency. Simply by declaring an emergency, we can unleash hundreds of billions of dollars to begin the transition and also to protect our coastal communities and the waterfront, so we can shut down these 22 new liquid natural gas plants, these export facilities that Joe Biden wants to build, which, by the way, kick us back to the year 2005. It makes Donald Trump look like a climate advocate to look at what Joe Biden is actually doing on LNG plant, which is a logical follow-on to the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline. They created a huge market. They're fulfilling that market now by building these new liquid natural gas export facilities.
That sounds just like America.
Just like America, yes.
Yeah, woo, land of the free. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Stein. It was absolutely lovely chatting with you.
Likewise. Thanks so much. Great talking with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Stein. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Wow, what a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, what a lovely woman too. She's just so nice. Great chatting with her. Also, gosh, she was very friendly towards Dr. West. Very, very politely reaffirmed a lot of what I had kind of inferred about that situation. Like, this dude has, like, the main accusation, the elephant in the room, nepotism. Oh, I want my family to be hired. Oh, I want to keep my people. It's kind of like it reads more like celebrity than activist. Like, oh, I want to bring, like, like when Aaron Rodgers agreed to go to the New York Jets, right? Aaron Rodgers is kind of a good through line, sports and politics. He was like, oh, I want to bring, what's that guy's name? He wanted to bring this like fucking horrible backup quarterback with him. This guy couldn't get a third string job anywhere in the NFL, but he wants him to be his backup quarterback because it's his friend. He likes talking to him. Wants to bring the offensive coordinator that he likes, right? Because that's his pal. They work well together. Guess how that worked out for the New York Jets? It was a huge disaster, right? Aaron Rodgers, all-star quarterback, amazing talent in the NFL. Nobody could deny that guy throws the ball like a dream. Nobody can deny that Cornel West can probably stump better than anybody on earth for the left. I mean, Bernie Sanders couldn't hold a candle to Cornel West on the stump. I mean, almost nobody can on earth, right? But when it comes to the behind the curtain stuff, when it becomes elephant in the room, and the fact that Dr. Stein, she was nice to him anyway after he said all that fucked up shit, I wouldn't have bit my tongue. No way. But that's why I don't run for president.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we need unity. I think she's acutely aware of that, and I'm still hoping that there's some sort of a unity, not a unity ticket, but I'm hoping that at some point Dr. West realizes that the Green Party is where it's at, that they have a far better chance at least receiving 5% of the vote, which, as Dr. Stein said, it's about the movement, not a person. So, even if you prefer Dr. West over Dr. Stein, it doesn't really matter. All that matters is building a movement, hopefully securing federal matching funds, or even getting that, 20% or more of the vote necessary to actually win, as Dr. Stein was talking about. So, yeah, I think that it's beyond obvious that her campaign is the more serious one. And, I mean, every time I hear Dr. Stein speak on the actual policy, I'm always really impressed with her understanding and knowledge of what's going on and all of these issues that are, routinely, completely ignored by not just the mainstream media, but even by independent and progressive media. So, yeah, great discussion. Very impressed, as always, by what Dr. Stein had to say. That went really well, I thought. Great conversation.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And shout out to you, Susie Stone. Jill has convinced me to contribute $100 a month to go, Jill. I get to vote for you again. Yeah, well, shout out to you, Susie Stone. Glad that this conversation was able to net some positives for us both. Yeah, I thought that you did a great job. And listen, guys,
One of the prerequisites to becoming president is that people have to be able to.
I'm about to end this stream, y'all. Please, subscribe to my channel. Google me on Yahoo and Bing. Follow all my social media. And just like, comment, hate, subscribe, share, comment, like, share, follow, subscribe, and comment some more. And thank you for taking the time to listen. And please keep on subscribe to my YouTube channel and keep on coming back for more content. Peace.
Yep.